Red Inker listener, don't forget to also subscribe and listen to Double Century, a podcast where I trawl through old newspaper reports and bitter books from former players to tell the story of our great game. Find Double Century in your podcast apps. This week on Red Inker, we talk to one of the most famous men in cricket, despite the fact he's not a cricketer, but he is a cricketer, of sorts.
Hi, this is Harsha. My job title at the moment, cricket broadcaster.
Harsha is one of the cricket world's most well-known faces. As a commentator, he has spent years being the lone non-cricketer in a sea of former greats. But the thing about Harsha being a non-cricketer is that he's not. He did play the game. And so in this episode, we talk about his early life following and playing the game and how that changed the way he looked at the sport and commentated on it. Then later on, he gets bored of talking about himself and he starts to question me on the future of cricket and analytics. So a test cricketer said to me once, Harsha, that I trust you. He was talking to me, not you. I trust you, Jarrod, because you played. It's not that you were any good. I'm sure you were terrible, but because you played and you know what it's like to bowl the wrong ball and drop a simple catch and run out your friend and all those sorts of things, that mattered to him more than me being a good cricketer. And it mattered to him that I had at least picked up a bat and understood it. And that's what I really want to talk to you about today, because you were a cricketer. We know you as Mr. Broadcaster, but at one stage, you were a small child with a bat, and that has all changed the way that you think about the game. You know, I did a lot of research on this. You were bugging your mother about playing cricket when you were 4 years old and talking to her about cricket. This has always been your thing, hasn't it?
There are no secrets in the internet world, are there, Jarrod? No secrets. I actually went back to try and figure out when I might have said that to my mother. Because I said, and you know how little children lisp, I said, I'm Buddhi Kundalan. So I figured out Buddhi Kundalan, who later migrated from India, played for Scotland for many years, passed away sadly a few years ago, Indian wicketkeeper, made 192. His big years were sort of 63, 64 to 67, 68. So assuming he was 65, I'm 3 or 4 years old. And that's when I said, I want to be Buddhi Kundalan. So it was just there. My father talked a bit about cricket. He taught me about acute angles and obtuse angles. You play defense, you defend with an acute angle because then the ball goes down. You defend an obtuse angle, the ball goes up. That's playing in the yard. But I absolutely enjoyed playing the game. I'm very hesitant to talk about it because in the circles we move in, the standards are so high that if you tell them I was a club cricketer, I represented my university, which is the pinnacle of my cricketing achievement, it's sort of saying, you know what, I wrote an article for my school magazine.
Yeah, but you say that. The amount of people that we have worked with who do the exact opposite of that, who claim to be commentators because they've commentated on one game, or claim to be writers because they literally spoke their book to another writer. So I think it's very fair. But it also, the reason I'm interested in that side of things is because you've gone on to be one of the most famous non-cricket playing people within the game as it currently stands. And yet, that's not fair. It's not fair to you. It doesn't matter if it's you or Jim Maxwell or Dan Norcross or myself. We actually are all cricketers at a certain point, and it does actually change the way that we think about the game a little bit. And you actually sent me a link, and I'd forgotten about this, but Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft, he talks about a lot, and I just read, I think it's in his book, but I just read a few extracts of it. He talks about, on the field, I learned a lot about myself, succeeding and failing as a bowler, a batsman, and a fielder. Now, if you've played cricket, you would have succeeded and failed as all of those things at times. And that's why I am a little bit interested, because there's no way that you can play cricket and it not affect the way that you would eventually become a commentator on it.
There's no doubt at all. The way I played my cricket and what I looked forward to when I got into broadcasting, there's a lot of similarities in there. I absolutely enjoyed playing cricket. It was a pretty decent level. It was senior division in Hyderabad. So I'm actually playing against the odd Ranji Trophy players, for example, sometimes with trepidation, sometimes with confidence, but I'm playing against them. And occasionally bowling to them, except that my leg breaks didn't fizz. So people had a lot of time to play them off the back foot. I could bowl the leg break, bowl the wrong one, but they didn't fizz, so they didn't hurt anybody. But I slowly moved up the batting order, but I was a very insecure cricketer because I was always thinking, right, how's the bowler going to get me out? Or if I bowl a ball, where's he going to hit me? And Jarrod, you might find this. I mean, you brought it up, so I'll talk about my cricket. Time I felt liberated was when I was fielding at point. I felt absolutely liberated. No one ever told me where to field. It was assumed I'm point. And the reason was the moment the batsman plays the ball anywhere in my geography, nobody can stop me now. It's the ball in me. And that to me was such a thrill that I remember when I played first season in senior division, this nerdy guy in glasses standing at point. And there's an Andhra Bank cricketer who's playing Ranji Trophy for Hyderabad, one of Hyderabad's better batsmen. And I'm telling you, can't take a run in front of me, man. And between overs, he walked across to his partner, they pointed at me and had a loud guffaw. But to be honest, I enjoyed fielding. I would experiment with fielding. I dropped 1 or 2 catches a year, no more. I experimented with fielding on my left and throwing underarm left-handed, as opposed to turning around, throwing right-handed. I do a lot of things, but all on my own, never with a coach. So funnily, I like that side better because no one came in my way. So when I'm going out to bat, someone's in my way.
I want to draw parallels here because I think there are some. That's a little bit like being the ball-by-baller as well. It's a one-on-one competition with you and a cricket. You can throw to everyone else later on, because the interesting thing is I was actually better at fielding than I was at anything else in cricket as well. I was a slip fielder, though, because I didn't like to run around unless it was in a one-day game and I could pretend to be Alan Border at short mid-wicket. But I like to be a slip fielder because I like the sort of the finality of slip fielding. I might only get 2 balls hit to me all day, but they're probably both going to be chances. And then the rest of the day, I could talk tactics with everyone else. It's funny how both of us went that way. So your batting never just got along. You just think you were too in your own head?
It got long. It got long, all right. I mean, the year that I got picked for my university side, for some reason, my father kept newspaper clippings. So that's the only year in which there exist any newspaper clippings of runs that I made. When you played senior division, if you got more than 20, then you were in the newspaper on a Monday. And I'll be completely honest, I never went to number 10 or 11, having made 18, saying, please give me your 2 runs. If you're 2 not out, you be 0 not out, I become 20. They were all actually honestly scored runs. But I was insecure, which is something that's traveled with me throughout my broadcasting career. I mean, I remember there was one game we were playing against State Bank of India, which was one of the best teams in the league. And I made 34 out of 90 in a senior division game for my side. And there was an Andhra Ranji Trophy player. We were playing on matting. I have no idea what turf. We were playing on matting wickets. And I leant into one, went for 4 past mid-off. And the Hyderabad Ranji Trophy opening batsman called Shahid Akbar, he's passing me. And he just pats me on the back and said, I didn't know you could bat like that. And honest to goodness, I turned around and he just walked off. But I was telling him, I didn't know either. So things would happen. There's so many times I'm playing a ball and I said, did it really go there? Because I never believed I could do it. And when it came to being pitched to the universities, Jarrod, and there's a story there that's accompanied me throughout my life because it changed me. A couple of my friends came and said, do you know you're in contention for a spot in the university side? The combined university, you're playing the All India Inter-University. And you're in contention? I said, me? They said, yeah. And he said, so that's what we've decided. For the next 4 or 5 games, you go and bat at number 3. I'm batting 6, right? 6, 7, 6, 7, 6. Occasionally 5, 6. I'm very happy at 6. It's a safe place to bat. They said, you're batting at 3 so that you score runs and strengthen your case. And I said, what if I get out? I said, I'm happy at 6. And they called me in the local language a donkey. These are friends of mine, so it's okay. But I learned one thing. If you shy away from a challenge, if you say no to a challenge, then you determine the answer to the outcome. You determine the outcome. The outcome is as is. If you say yes to a challenge, you never know what world you're entering. If I had said yes to 3, who knows what world would have opened out for me? I might have played 1 level up, no more. But that is something I carried into broadcasting. Will you do BBC World Service from under a desk with Michael O'Dwyer's phone in one hand, a microphone in the other, a paper down, and I'm sitting under the desk and a wicket falls. And I'm hearing the cue from someone from London. Will you do that? Yes, sir. Will you host a telecast? What does that mean? I have no idea what it means. Do I have a jacket? No, I don't. I'll go and buy one. Will you do that? Yes, sir. Will you do digital? Yes, sir. Will you do crickballs? Yes, sir. I learned to say yes because I should have said yes then. So you're right. Your experiences as a cricketer do determine your outcomes afterwards. But Jarrod, I searched in broadcasting for what was dear to me when I was playing senior division cricket, which is everybody plays together. I remember we were playing this big inter-college final. Was a big game. And we have no chance because the other team has sports quota. So there are cricketers who are given admission as cricketers in that side. So 3 or 4 of them are playing first-class cricket by then already. And we lose by 25. And I've never played a Ranji Trophy in-swing bowler. I can't pick an in-swing from an out-swing, right? And my thighs, both my thighs are peppered, red, black, whatever color. And by the time I come back with number 11, I'm not out at the end. I come back with number 11. A lot of our senior players are packed and ready to go. And I said, does it not hurt you? And I always searched for that in the teams I played in. And I always searched for that in the broadcasting teams. And the most fun I've had is in the broadcasting teams where everyone is helping each other. Hence ABC. ABC box, everybody. It was Jim, Tim Lane, later on Glenn Mitchell, for a while Neville Oliver. And not once did they make me feel I was this young kid who'd come from India wide-eyed. So that is why with ABC, I search for places where I feel happy in a good team. Star Sports, excellent team, 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everyone playing for each other. So that's what I search for. And
you obviously, I mean, you've talked about your experiences. You must have also had experiences where I would say that you're a broadcaster who very much likes to put cricket in the context of it being a game. Whereas there are other broadcasters who like to put it in the context of it being more, a proxy for war and an intellectual exercise. Everyone's got their own little construct that they have in their mind. How much of that came about from you playing at that level of cricket and realizing that maybe some people took themselves a little bit too seriously? Or was that just something that you always had within you?
No, I played for fun. Not once did I wake up in the middle of the night dreaming that I'm picked for India. Never once. It was never an ambition. Because you played for fun. While I'm playing, I remember the year I got picked for my college's team in lower junior in C division cricket for the first time. I was playing the first year there. I'm doing an advanced diploma in French. I'm doing chemical engineering classes in the morning, doing practicals in the afternoon, and I'm playing cricket in the evening. It was one of the things I was doing. I enjoyed doing it, but it was one of the things I was doing. And it was just so much fun. When I'm fielding at point, unlike at slip, where two balls come to you, every single ball that was ever bowled was going to come to me. And yeah, cricket is a game. I think it's also because I grew up in a university campus, a little village behind us. I saw a lot of life very early. And it's only a game. We're privileged to play it, man. Look at other people's lives around. So even when India and Pakistan are playing the final of a tournament, yes, there's a bit of tension. Yes, there's a bit of pressure. Yes, you want your side to win. But I've always told my sun rises tomorrow morning. And we're in a skirmish with China. People have not come back home. Where's the war?
And you did play with some pretty serious cricketers, didn't you? Was it Arshad Ayab? I've probably pronounced
that. I played 3 years with him, yeah. 3 years in the same side. He went on to play 13 tests, yeah.
He was an off-spinner, was he? Yeah.
Off-spinner, very good batsman down the order, solid batsman. 89, 90, 91, 88, 89, that period. Played a lot against the West Indies, yeah.
Having a friend like that, I notice someone like Paul Newman who came up with Nasser Hussain, and I've seen a couple of people who've come up in the sports industry with a friend who happened to be an athlete. So one goes off and becomes a writer or a broadcaster, and the other one goes off to be a player. It always seems that they have a different sort of view on things, just because they've seen someone work hard and all the sacrifice that goes in. I think for some of us who maybe haven't been around those sorts of people, he went to an academy and he had all the advantages, and of course he's gone on to be a test cricketer. But you would have seen the opposite of that. You would have seen the graft of how someone actually becomes good. Do you think that changed anything for you?
It did. There's another name I saw very closely, was in the same university side as me. We went to Delhi to play the All India Inter-University. And then our careers sort of moved parallel. I'm this rookie hoping to get a gig somewhere. And Azharuddin is slowly rising up the charts. And that's why I did his biography in 93, 94. It's not that we were what we call in Hyderabad chaddiyars, guys in shorts who played played cricket with each other. Played a lot against him, knew a lot of stories about him, exchanged a lot of thoughts. One of the most generous, kind human beings I met. Life suddenly turned. But when I wrote his biography, I could sense a similar upbringing because of the city we grew up in. So while Arshad finished in 91, but we're still friends whenever we meet in Hyderabad. And he was with the Hyderabad Cricket Association. But with Azharuddin, I could see the change and the progress as it went along. And we always spoke in the language of our childhood.
Mm. And did you see him become the person that he would ultimately become? Or was that a shock to you?
No, it wasn't a shock, because he was the talking point in Hyderabad for a long time. And he played one innings against us. That is the first 2-page chapter of the book I wrote on him, which was simply magical. It was magical. I was moved from point to stand at mid-wicket because he was playing those risky shots. Matting wickets, we all grew up playing shots like those. It was a magical innings. So we knew he'd be a good player. He wasn't the fielder that he became, but we knew he'd be a very good player. But who thought he's going to play 99 test matches? But he was also a very simple, God-fearing person. So who knows?
How did that affect you then when the match fixing all came about? I mean, you must have been, especially as a broadcaster, you're in a weird situation there. You've written his book, as you said. That must be almost a moral question that you're putting through with yourself at that point.
94. The book came out in 94. I think his marriage broke down a year after that. And I was pestering the publishers to do that quickly, because when I spoke to his wife, she was this lovely, simple Indian Muslim wife. And I knew that there was something happening by 95. So by the time the book came out, there were rumbles over there. But the major rumors started to surface about 97. The book appeared 93, 94. The rumors started to surface 97. The ban came 2000. It missed the series in 98, 99. The ban came in 2000. And even though we knew it was coming, it still hits you. And sometimes I sit and think about the journey that life takes you through. And I think, Jarrod, you and me are happy, very lucky we played just that amount of cricket and continue to enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things I was quite interested about, because his name obviously did come up in the research, and you are in a very privileged position to be able to see, well, two international cricketers, but one who goes on to be a megastar and then sadly have a decline. But you get to see the effects of a different kind of fame, because you obviously have a lot of fame in your life, but there's a different kind of fame than you get as a host and a broadcaster, than you get as a Test captain of India. It's just a different level. You know, people expect different things of them. You know, I'm sure you've changed as a human being, but did you see the sort of lifestyle change? You know, did you see him be a different boy than he was, or is it different for you guys? Because you, as you said, you talked in the Hyderabadi sort of childhood, you know, language. You guys have this sort of short. Yeah, I saw
the change come about, especially mid-90s. I didn't see any change to the mid-90s. He was still the same small town guy who could not say no. I mean, I've written a story in the book. I've written about it elsewhere as well. I used to syndicate his columns for him, and I owed him some money because I'd got the money. I hadn't given it to him back yet, and I said, I owe you some money. He said, I'm in Mumbai in a couple of days. I'll come and pick it up. And our house is about 60% broken down. There's workers in the house who are trying to. And their jaw dropped because the doorbell rings and Azharuddin walks in. And he goes up to those workers and says, "This is my friend's house. See that you do a good job." So that was the person, 91, 92, 93. I saw the change starting to come about in 96 once when he asked me to buy a 200-pound shirt. And I said, "Azhar, I don't buy 200-pound shirts." He said, "It's a very good shirt." I said, "No, I don't buy 200-pound shirts."
Well, things have changed now. You're wearing one now, so it's all good. Even you've changed.
This little white unbranded T-shirt, yeah.
Going back to your cricket, what else do you think? I think that a lot of what I do comes back to how I played the game, and I came up in a very brutal Melbourne outer suburban cricket competition where it was a violent competition. There were, you know, people attacking each other, and the sledging was, you know, I've said this before, but I once batted when I was 15 in a senior game, and they were threatening to rape my mother while I was batting. So it was a completely different kind of thing. So I grew up there. You obviously grew up in a slightly more friendly situation than outer suburban Melbourne at that point. But there must be things that you've taken, you know, from your individual game that you sort of bring across, even if you don't mention it on air, because as you said, you know,
I'll tell you what the most important thing I picked up was the joy at seeing a ball go to the boundary that you didn't think would go to the boundary. But more than anything else, the emotions of the game, Jarrod. When you lose a game that you're expected to win, the impact it has on you, you're sitting there in our little, you know, we call it a dressing room. It's just a tiny little thing, but we had a proper pavilion. And you're just sitting there and you're sad. You're sad till the sun rises the next morning. So you know what that feeling is. Or, as happened to me once, we are 30 for 5 playing against one of the best sides in the league, and I'm going out there and block. You never know. We've put together a partnership. We pulled the team out. It was not going to happen. So the high that comes with something that you didn't expect, the low that comes with games that you lose, the enormous surprise when you've gone after a catch with hope as your only ally, and then it sticks. So the emotions of the game were what I understood. I may not have had the skill to play the game, but at my own level, the emotions of winning and losing and disappointment and coming back home and telling your mother this is that's what happened today, and she putting an arm around you. Now that happens. Mike Hussey, I heard a podcast of Mike Hussey's where he said that's what his wife did to him when he got back one day. Yeah? So the emotions of the game don't change whatever level you're playing at. It's just that when you fail in front of 20 million people, it's magnified a little bit, but the feeling. So that is something I learned. I learned the smells of the game. The smell of a bat. I learned the smell of a cricket ball. You know, when you're playing on matting wicket, there used to be a little glaze on the balls that you played. They were not very expensive balls. So the glaze started to go away afterwards, and then the leather would start to peel off. You're playing on a jute matting wicket. The leather started to peel off, and the smell of that, we still didn't have ready-to-play bats, so there was oiled bats. So I learned to enjoy the smells of the game, the sounds of the game, the round chalk that you had to mark your guard when you got there, the shoes with the spikes poking you from underneath because the cobbler had hammered them in from the back, and so you wore an extra pair of socks. So those were the things that I remember very fondly, and playing for each other, which to me was the most beautiful thing. Feeling happy that your friend has taken 5 wickets, for example.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And when you get into broadcasting quite early, are you 19 when you start broadcasting?
Yeah. My first class game, yeah.
Yeah. So
it was quite a story, yeah.
So from that point onwards, it must be quite hard for you to play cricket.
It ran parallel for a year and a bit. I got picked on my university side in 81, 82, so early 82. But I've done my first Ranji Trophy game in 81. So I'm going to play a league game, but I'm actually doing commentary on a Ranji Trophy game that they allowed you to play. So that happened in parallel for a year. It was a bit tricky. I must say it was a bit tricky, but it was good fun. What I learned in that year, though, when I first did radio commentary, that the pre-television radio commentator was king, man. He was king. It didn't matter whether the ball was square cut. If he called it a drive, it was a drive.
I always say that writing about first-class games that are not telecast is still the best kind of cricket writing because there's a romanticism that you can put into the game that the highlights just don't back up. When do you stop playing cricket altogether? And so I suppose what I'm asking is, are you one of those guys who goes down to the Maidans in Bangalore in your 20s? Or once you become a broadcaster, does that sort of all end once you finish playing university?
No, once I finished chemical engineering, I was very lucky. The biggest break of my life, I got into India's top management school. I don't know why. It's an insane level of competition, but maybe I had a good CV as someone who played university cricket, had got a decent rank in chemical engineering, had a distinction in French and in my advanced diploma. I actually acted as an interpreter at a chemical engineering trade fair once because there was a French participation in there. So I had this weird kind of CV, so they thought interesting guy maybe. But when I went there, I didn't enjoy playing cricket there that much because there was no intensity to playing it. Then I in my job, I played a couple of years for my advertising agency. But after that, I found that social cricket didn't excite me that much. If a ball went between the legs of somebody at mid-off, it was okay. But in the cricket I played, it wasn't. So I didn't enjoy it after that. And I haven't played for 10, 15 years now. Certainly when it doesn't matter to you, but when you start getting progressive lenses, you look at the balls with the top half and suddenly it vanishes. And the focal length of your lenses when it comes down is very different. And also when I dropped a catch, that never happened. I said goodbye.
Yeah, that was the end. That's interesting that because you always come across as such a love of the game person, but the social cricket thing. So that was a big problem for me.
Look, I'll tell you one story. I did play one game though, which was the biggest game of my life. This is 2003-04 thereabouts. I'm 42, 43 years old. I also played one at the Bowral at Bradman Oval in Bowral, by the way, for the LBW Trust. The LBW Trust was promised a certain amount of money if Peter Roebuck and me went and played a game. So Peter picks me up at the airport. I can write 1,000 words on the interiors of Peter Roebuck's car, pretty much like his handwriting all over the place. And we played that game. So I think I was LBW, and because I was the guest, they didn't give me out. But I played at the Wankhede Stadium, 10,000 people. It's a tsunami relief game. So there's television people, film people, cricket people. And I bowled one of the actors called Ritesh Deshmukh caught Azharuddin Bhogle in the scorecard. And then that idiot Mohammad Kaif came and hit me with a couple of sixes. But Rahul Dravid told me, and that's the biggest compliment I've had, he said, forget your bowling for a while, but you threw on the full from the boundary stated to Parthiv Patel's gloves. You got a good throwing arm. I said, Rahul, doesn't matter. Don't ever take that line back. But it was good fun. It's good fun. I'm fielding at points with Sehwag on one side, Harbhajan on the other. That's not bad.
You might still have been the best fielder in that ring.
I'm 43 years old. 42 years old.
Those are the sorts of games that I get to play in now, and it is quite random too. You get asked to be in a game like that, and you're not quite sure what the standard is going to be. You end up with some old English cricket writer lobbing hand grenades up like Shield Berry does, and then at the other end you've got Andy Caddick steaming in. Or I had to face Steve Elworthy at the Oval one day, and I think I might have annoyed Steve Elworthy with a column at one stage. So that was a bit quicker than I was. He's a very fit man, Steve Elworthy, for someone his age. So I know what it's like to be in those games and to, sort of find yourself in a very weird situation. But I do find it interesting though that once the competitive nature went out, that you weren't as involved. I almost thought that the social games might be more your kind of style.
No, I don't know, because I enjoyed playing cricket. I enjoyed preventing someone from sneaking a single in front of me. And if they did take a single, I said, I'm going to try and throw the stumps down to the non-strikers in from point, which is not that easy for a right-hander, as opposed to a left-hander who will do it easier. So that excitement, I started enjoying batting more than fielding and bowling. And I found that the Maidans of Mumbai are so small that you can flick a six over the boundary at square leg. And that told me to look at the Maidan scores with... a little pinch of salt here and there. But no, I didn't enjoy the social game at all.
Beautiful. Now, you wanted to ask me some questions. So I think we've covered Harsha, the cricketer. And I honestly think that it's a very interesting tale. Although, what a weird hero to have, one of Scottish India's finest players in a period of Scottish cricket that no one even remembers as well.
Budhi Kundalan. I wish I had a coach when I was playing. Never, ever had a coach. We had one for the school team, but he sort of just knocked balls at you and whatever. I remember asking Arshad once, I said, Arshad, why my leg break's not turning that much? And he said, you're sprinting to the crease, give the ball time. And I said, oh, I didn't know that. So I never had a coach. Luckily, that was a big difference. In my early years in broadcasting, 91, 92, the ABC with Alan Marks and Jim Maxwell, telling me little things about broadcasting, making friends with Jim and Tim, a friendship and Glenn thereafter, a friendship that's lasted 30 years. I mean, last year when I was in Australia, I said all three of us are going out for dinner. And Karen Tai came along as well, and we had the most beautiful dinner that day. So building those relationships. But then when I started on television, again, no idea what to expect. I'm hosting India versus New Zealand. I don't even know what the director tells you in the year. No idea at all. But then with Simon Wheeler and Michael O'Dwyer, just telling me little things, what to wear, what not to wear. And then there were two series I did. I hosted the World Cup of Football in 2006. Every single day in Singapore. Going at 4:35 in the evening, coming back at 6 in the morning, have breakfast, go to sleep, get up at 3:30, go back to the studio every single day. And then the 2011 World Cup every single day. I did every single game of the 2011 World Cup from the studio. But very good producers. I was very lucky in cricket. I worked with very good producers. I wish I had that when I was playing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I had a very similar thing. It wasn't until I was very late in my career that I realized that I was a leg spinner like you. I had my arm in the wrong spot. And the reason I wasn't getting enough spin was just because it was on the wrong side of my body. It's such a simple thing.
And also, did you also bowl from here?
I was very high because I tried to be
I was an off spinner. Yeah, I was an off spinner initially. Until one day at the nets, this kid turned up. Right, I'm the school off spinner. This kid turns up and he goes, the ball goes and zips like that. I said, where's this kid come from? He went from being a reserve in the school nets to playing for India schools in 1 year. And if you meet Derek Pringle, ask him about Anand Vatsal, and he said, we just could not. He was doing too much for us. So I said, future lies in being a leg break bowler. So now you're bowling off spin from here. Sorry with that bent arm is just to get it in frame. You're bowling off spin here. So now what happens? You said, okay, I'll bowl leg spin. So now leg spin, your hand is still there. So now you're getting the wrong hand a little bit better, but your ball's not turning very much because your hand is there. And then you see Vaughan, and he's bowling from here, and he said, oh, that's different. So anyway, you learn those little things. See, when your friend says, I respect you because you played cricket, I do know that. If you bowl leg breaks from here, you're not going to get much. Anil Kumble bowl leg breaks from here. Shane Vaughan bowl leg breaks from here.
Yeah.
So yeah, you learn to pick up those little things. You know what it is to pick up a mistimed shot, especially if we're doing commentary off tube a lot these days. So if you're doing commentary off tube, just get an instinct. I think that shot is mistimed. It's not clearing the boundary. But I'll tell you what I'm very keen about. For someone like me, I've got to stay ahead of the curve all the time because I have no future otherwise. I have to try and be ahead of the curve. And I'm fascinated by analytics in sport. And I'll tell you what it's doing to broadcasting. All along, the broadcaster's gut was king. I think he's a very good player. I think he's very good batting at number 6 and getting into the bowlers and finishing the game at the end. And now there's this kid sitting next to you, the nerd I was when I was fielding at backward point, who's saying, not saying, well, in a man who's speaking, uncle, the numbers are telling a different story. The numbers are saying the first 10 balls, his strike rate's only 80. Next 10 balls, his strike rate is 220. Why do you want to send him with 2 overs are left? I'm learning left arm. Why is Stuart Binney bowling the first over for RCB? Why is just a change bowler coming and bowling the first over? And I'm fascinated by analytics. Analytics are challenging the broadcaster. So I'm very interested in knowing where I've actually got questions for you. So it can embellish a broadcast and it can challenge a broadcaster. What are your thoughts on where it's going? Because sometimes, and I've seen this with a couple of analysts, they start to think they're the coach.
Okay.
So where does it end? So
I was brought in on TalkSport basically to be the fourth person or third person voice. So a little bit what Zoltzman does and Andrew Sampson does, except that they wanted it to be analytics and not, they didn't want, this is the 44th time that someone has scored a single off
and he's good at that, but it works better in print, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what TalkSport wanted was, Butler is coming out to bat. What works against Butler? What we've found is that as long as a discussion with the broadcaster, it doesn't matter if they're wrong. Does that make sense? There's a certain tension that you can have along. So if Alex Tudor is in there and he tells me that, this guy smashes left arm bowling all the time, I'll say, well, that's interesting, Tudes, because if you look at these numbers here, he actually doesn't. He averages 20 against left arm seam with a high strike rate, but 40 against right arm seam. And that becomes a discussion. I think the problem is that a lot of people who do that and analytics on broadcasting are just passing pieces of paper across or whispering in your ear. It's the conversation that is great. So look at the guys I work with, Mark Butcher, Darren Goff, Mark Nicholas, those sorts of people. If you tell them they're wrong on air, it then becomes a great 2-minute little moment where we're all trying to one-up each other. It doesn't matter that I have analytics at this point and that they've got, well, in Goffy's case, a couple of 100 wickets, or Matty's case, Matty Pryor, one of the best wicket-keeper batsmen. That doesn't matter at this stage. It's two different cricket fans with two different perspectives, right? But at the same point, they'll all say, Matt Pryor will say to me over and over again, I don't do numbers, right? And then the minute he's challenged in his commentary, he sort of slips the headphones down and says to me, "Can you come up with some numbers here?" Because he knows that his knowledge is hit at a dead wall. He can't go any further, but he knows that if I come up with analytics, he can then bounce off that, even if he disagrees with me. So I think that can be part of it. I just don't think that has been, I think there's a very accurate thing that you said. You talked about the nerdy guy beside you with the glasses, like you being a point fielder. I think I probably am allowed to be nerdy because I have a broadcasting background, whereas quite often you guys will get a 23-year-old IIT student in who probably knows way more about the maths than I do, but he doesn't maybe know how to talk to a former test player.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting here is Matt Pryor's taken his headset off and said, find me some numbers. Is there a hierarchy in the box? Is the broadcaster the doctor and the analyst the nurse? Is there a hierarchy? Because in course of time, I can see there is a hierarchy in the boxes that I'm in. Because the analyst wants desperately to impress the broadcaster with the skills that he has. In course of time, I would like to see that hierarchy broken and you say the broadcaster's there for a specific skill, the producer's there for a specific skill, the cameraman is there for a specific skill, and the analyst is there for a specific skill. But at the moment, I notice a little hierarchy. I remember in the World Cup 2019, we had 4 analysts in each of the 4 crews, and good people. And Michael Atherton was asked to do a little analytics piece. And this guy comes to him and said, this is what the numbers are showing. This is what's showing, whatever. He said, but I don't agree. And Michael says it politely, of course. Michael's a polite man. He said, politely. He said, but I don't agree. And he said, I can't see myself doing this piece. And he said, no. Because he didn't agree with the numbers. And to be fair to him, he found a reason. He explained why he didn't agree with the numbers. But the analyst was supposed to give the broadcasters the number, not the analyst presenting the numbers. So that is something I'd like to see change. But what I'm fascinated by, with what people like you do and what a lot of others do, is you are doing it in real time. I'm broadcasting in real time. So when something happens, I have to react to it in real time. In an IPL game, something happens, I'm suddenly having to relate it to somebody who's watching in Chennai falling off his chair at home while Dhoni has hit a 6. How do you pull out numbers in real time? Because you've got to be ahead of the game almost to say, I think this number could become necessary. Let me have it ready, which something Mohandas Menon is fantastic at in his old world school of stats.
Yeah, I think, when I started with TalkSport, our big thing was that most statisticians, while being brilliant at what they do, basically tell you what's just happened.
Yes.
And what we wanted to do on TalkSport was tell you what perhaps was about to happen. So as I used the Butler one before, but when Bairstow and Roy walked out to bat for a one-dayer in the West Indies and Sheldon Cottrell comes on the bowl, and I say, well, Sheldon Cottrell is only playing because of Bairstow and Roy's record. They know that England aren't very good against left-arm bowling. We expect him to take wickets here. He then takes 5 wickets, and I look like a genius, right? But you and I both know that the next game he probably goes for 80 runs and doesn't take those wickets. So I'm already ahead of all those curves. I'm basically going through all those players and looking for what I would say, and this comes back to me being a writer, but I'm looking for the narrative arc. So I'm not that interested in the numbers. I'm looking at the narrative arc. What is this guy's strengths? What is his weaknesses? What's his kryptonite? What has he tripped over before? And then what will he come up against in this match that will come across this? So when Chris Gayle is batting, I'm saying they're not going to bowl Adil Rashid for as long as possible because they know what, and I know that England team are looking at almost exactly the same numbers as me and going, well, we can't bowl Chris Gayle to Adil Rashid. Chris Gayle's already on 80 of 60 balls in this game. We can't do it. So what I'm trying to do then is I know before the game those basic facts, and then it's about spreadsheets really from then on in. So statisticians generally don't use spreadsheets as much, whereas analytics, if some of the guys who do what I do actually code the stuff themselves using computer coding program. I'm not quite at that level, but I have spreadsheets on my spreadsheets. So before an ODI game, I will have something like 28 different spreadsheet panels available to me so that straight away, if an off spinner comes on, I've got 2 batsmen at the crease, I go to versus off spin, and then I just find the 2 batsmen and I can say it straight away. And I look like a genius, but realistically, I've done this work a month earlier and it's just a case of finding it. So a lot of what I do is finding it, and then doing it that way. But as long as you are reading the game, you do have to read it differently than you do as a writer or as a commentator. Because as a ball by ball guy, a lot more is reaction. Whereas I find doing the analysis, and also I'm a weird hybrid because I've done ball by ball. I've done co-coms. I've now done the analysis. I've done host. I've done almost every one of those jobs. So I am
someone who was a freelancer. I'll tell you the perils of being freelance. You cannot say no.
Yeah, exactly.
The option, and because you cannot say no, and you're forced to say yes, you actually become better at more things than you otherwise would have been, because now you have no choice. But I'll tell you something else. Now, what was it? Yeah, there you go. England are playing Australia, not the semi-final of the World Cup, the game before, in the league stage. Bairstow Roy opening the batting. I just did an interview on Quick Buzz with David Warner a month or so ago. And he says,
I saw it.
Look at the analyst, and the analyst says, Behrendorff and Stark might be a good combination up front against Roy and Bairstow. And what does Behrendorff do first over? He gets the Yorker in that hits base of middle, which is, of course, the dream. But that happens sometimes. How do you take into account the mindset of a player. I mean, that's like Adil Rashid bowling leg spin to Chris Gale, batting 80 of 45 balls, just waiting for the ball to turn into him because no boundary at mid-wicket's long enough. But Adil Rashid saying, you know what, I fancy you, Chris Gale. And that confidence that comes through then makes a little difference as well. Saying, okay, I know that's what you're going to do to me, but come on, let's do the challenge. And that attitude very often makes a difference. Or you might say, you know what, this guy bowls wide Yorkers really well to Jason Roy, say. But that morning, he's not feeling great about bowling that. So how do you factor that in?
It's very interesting. So the first team I worked with outside of a consultancy role was St. Lucia. And something happened on the field at St. Lucia that was just, it didn't make any sense from a cricket logic point of view, let alone an analytics point of view. So I went up to Kyron Pollard after the game. I said, look, no judgment. I just need to know how to do my job better. Why did you go with this bowling change at this time? I said, because you had all the information and you and I discussed it. And he said, first bowler I went to, when I went to give him the ball, he told me he doesn't like that end. And I was like, what? Like, this guy's only played at this ground like 4 times. And I was like, okay, well, why didn't you go with that bowler? He said he didn't want to bowl a second over in the power play. He gets touchy when I ask him to bowl 2 overs in the power play. And that was the moment I realized that the analytics is really, really important. But the other thing that is really important is remembering that these guys aren't that much different than club cricketers at a certain point. They believe in superstition. They believe in form. They believe in all those sorts of things. So I think that what you have to do, especially if you're dealing with a captain, because a captain has to make the sort of decisions you were just talking about whether someone's confident or not, you have to go with the captain. But what you have to be able to do is at the end of the game is talk to the captain and go, why were these decisions made? Right? Is there something that we can, as an analyst, you almost see yourself as almost a therapist at times, because you're trying to link the captain with the player and the coach. So I can go back to the coach and go, that decision that you can't believe your captain made, he made that because of this bowler. Maybe when we go out and we bowl in centre wicket practice, that bowler only bowls from that end over and over again until he just feels like it's his end, right? Now, that doesn't sound like analytics, but it is, because in my mind, I need him to be comfortable from either end so that I can get the most out of him from my point of view. So a lot of that comes down to we don't prepare cricketers correctly. So a lot of that confidence and that them feeling, why did that guy not feel confident about bowling the wide Yorkers that day? Had he not practiced wide Yorkers? Had no one told him he was going to practice wide Yorkers? We had another situation with another team where we threw a part-timer in to bowl with the new ball because it was a good matchup. And I'm more than happy to exploit a good matchup. That's part of analytics. But when the bowler came off the field, I said to him, when was the last time you bowled with a new ball? And he goes, I haven't touched a new ball in 8 months. And I said, when we do training, what ball do they give you? And he goes, if I get a bowl at training, it's with the old ball against the tail enders. And so, again, you go back to the coaches and the captains. It's like, your gut feeling was probably right there, but it didn't work. And here's why it didn't work. He dragged 2 balls down because a new ball, as a former off spinner, a new ball in your hand feels different. It doesn't come out the same. At that point, I don't think it's as much about feeling. It's about as much about getting as much information as you can about these guys, and then how do you help them? So analytics is, I look at it as a more holistic way than maybe perhaps other analysts do. But I didn't until I worked with the team, and suddenly you realize that guy does feel weird, and that guy needs more practice, and all those sorts of things, and you start to bring them together.
I found what you said amusing, and I cannot say that on a broadcast. I can say that on a podcast. I once came off a 10-15 minute conversation with a very senior Indian player who was a national selector at the time, many years ago. And I came away fearing for the future of Indian cricket. Because he might have been excellent at standing behind the stumps or bowling something, but the kind of conversation he was having, I said, oh, okay, I hope there's something more, but I came away a little worried. But the reason analytics works very well on a broadcast is, what is the end purpose of a broadcast? It is to make the game more interesting to the person listening. That is the only reason we are in this profession. We are subservient to the listener or the viewer, and our primary job is not to tell him how much we know, but to tell him, and increasingly happily her, here's something that will make the game more interesting for you. I don't know if it will happen, but here's something that could make it interesting. And you're saying, oh, they've got the left-hander up against a left-hand batsman in a power play. What could happen? Because the analyst just told me this doesn't happen normally. So you've just made it a little more interesting, which is finally what our job is. So that's the funny thing with analytics. And I work a lot in T20, but I work in India, where television is advertising driven, not subscription driven. When it's subscription driven, the analyst largely comes in the breaks. Because in the 6 balls, the ball by ball man or the expert is reacting to what is happening and things are happening very fast. In T20, in India, where does the analyst come in? Because as soon as the last ball is bowled, we're into a break. We come back when the bowler is running in to bowl the first ball. Well, I wonder if... So radio is a great medium. Radio is a great medium. But here's the dichotomy. Analytics is made for T20 cricket. Because every ball is a challenge, right? Analytics is made for T20 cricket, but on air, increasingly T20 cricket is on lesser and lesser time to use that unless you use the breaks better.
I suppose part of then becomes about...
Or use graphics. Sorry to interrupt.
I was going to say, yeah.
Graphics.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Then it becomes how you use graphics. But even T20 on radio, and I don't know how much T20 you've done on radio, but there's still not a lot of time because the teams are hammering around the field. If a spin bowler's on, so for TalkSport, they actually get me to commentate the T20 games because it would be a waste me being in the analysis chair because I wouldn't get on very much. And
there's an extra man to pay.
Yeah, exactly. As you know, that it's only a couple of games and they're only 3 hours long. If we can pay one less person, we will. So it actually becomes a lot easier to do it that way. But you're right. I think visual is the way to go. I think there's a lot of very obvious visual stuff that analysis, and I think cricket's been quite good at that. I mean, we look down on cricket sometimes with these sorts of things, but the worm, for instance, and the Manhattan and those sorts of things, those are quite not complicated graphics, but those are quite advanced graphics that came about in the 90s in sport at a time where most other sports weren't even trying to put things like that on the screen, and cricket was trying to show you more information in a pretty way.
Even placing batsmen in 4 quadrants, because with strike rate on one axis and batting average on one axis, and it tells you for the major part of the first 2 or 3 years, Babar Azam had an average of 50, 55, but a strike rate of 120. And if you're playing with a strike rate of 110, 115 in T20 cricket, the longer you bat, the more you're ensuring your team's defeat. So suddenly the batting average is running contrary to what the batting average does in any other form.
Do you know there's one that I wish... Sorry, I was going to say there's one I wish they would use more in TV, which is, I think it might have been Michael Wagner, the New Zealand statistician who came up with it. It's so brilliant. Basically, on one axis, you have a dot ball percentage, and on the other axis, you have balls per boundary. And then you have 4 quadrants, and you can tell what kind of player you have. You have the strike rotators up here. You have the AB de Villiers who can do everything down here. You have Chris Gale and the big slogging openers here. And you have the slow coaches up there. And in one moment, you can straight away say, this is this kind of player. It is such a beautiful thing. I just wish that would come across some more. But those are the things that we're learning about the game, as we go through.
Which takes me back to my pet theory. I've got this pet theory. Today, once you're mounting a broadcast, the cost of an additional channel is minuscule. And I've long believed there must be 3 or 4 broadcasts for every game. There's one, which is the cricketers broadcast, which is full of cricketers with their stories and telling you what's likely to happen. There is the nerds broadcast, where there's 2 guys saying, you know what, this is the matchup, this is likely to happen. Let's see what happens. I've got these numbers, but you're not inundating with numbers, but you're using numbers as a good... There might be a 3rd with a comedian involved, I don't know, and a 4th with no commentary at all.
You and I have had this conversation, I think, on Cricinfo about 8 years ago.
Yes. Yes.
I must have been around the IPL, and we had a big chat about it, and we both agree that you cannot do one commentary team in this day and age. No, especially when you've got, I think, Twitter, and Reddit and all those other things. You've now got all these different opinions. Realistically, there is no one cricket commentary team. I think you're right. I think Sky do an incredible job of commentating cricket in England. But I also think that if I was a 20-year-old turning on and I wasn't a massive cricket fan, I'm not sure if Athers and NASA are quite what I would be looking for to listen to from a commentary standpoint. And
you have the choice. Yeah. You're going into a store, you've got 3 brands of chips. And it's the job of the chips manufacturer to appeal to you.
Mm.
Then you've got 3 channels. It's the job of the broadcaster and the team on each channel to appeal to the viewer. The viewer's king. We should never, ever forget that. We all live at the mercy of the viewer and the listener. So the viewer says, you know what? Let's listen to this Kimber fellow, man.
Well,
Do I listen? Suddenly, Kimber versus Nasser, which would never, ever be an acceptable matchup, is now a matchup. And you're in the same free market. You might be catering to 100, he might be catering to 1,000 or 20,000. But in your 100, you still have your 100 who want your kind of broadcast. Put Kimber and Hussein together, I'm not sure it's working the same way. So I believe there should be 2-3 channels. Once television networks have made all their money out of the top broadcasters, hopefully they'll want this nerd feel at a backward point on one of those. But thereafter, you should allow people sitting at home, 2 guys sitting at home and saying, right, let's mount our broadcast. I don't know how it will work with rights. Let's mount our broadcast.
So IPL already do something similar, don't they? They've got the Dean Jones-led commentary, which is separate.
Studio.
Yeah, they've got local languages, which I know is a different kind of thing, but again, it seems to be seeping in. But I'm with you. It seems like a no-brainer. I think baseball's been doing it for quite a long time. So the problem is that baseball actually had a big problem because it had the Moneyball come through. And that seeped into the commentary, and it meant that if you weren't a massive baseball nerd, you couldn't watch baseball commentary anymore. So they had to do something to give something else. And I wonder if that wouldn't happen in cricket as well. It's a very interesting thing. But with TV companies cutting costs all around the world, I'm not sure that they're about to do that.
I was going to ask you about the future of the media. I don't know if I've got enough time. I don't know if you do with 2 children tugging at you. My children are so grown up, they don't need me anymore. They live by themselves. One of them does at least. One of the most fascinating meetings I've had came in about April 2016. It's not a good time for me. Right? It's not a good time for me because I've got this call saying, sorry, we don't want you to do commentary anymore. And no reason assigned. That's a long story we won't get into. It's a life lesson in that what I believe was my biggest disappointment in life turned out to be the biggest opportunity, as it turns out. Mm. And my life changed for the positive as a result. But this man calls me and says, you know what? Do you want to come and join me for breakfast? I'm a private equity person. I fund various things and I'm fascinated. Will you have breakfast with me tomorrow? And he calls someone else from another company. It's a stand-up comedy firm that was doing really well, that he's funded, and that is now in the next stage. And he said, I want to do that with you. He said, the era of that commentary that you're doing now is on the decline, in his view. And he said, I want you to convert what you think is a setback into the biggest business move of your life. So you sit at home and broadcast games. We'll figure out a way to be on the legal side of it. You sit at home, broadcast games. I'll have a whole team and an organization. We'll set up a media company. And will you bat at number 3? I said, no, because I still wanted to be at the ground broadcasting. I don't know if that would have worked, but this is in 2016, a venture capital person saying that is where the game is going because the US has already seen that. You know what? I'm told gaming commentators make tons of money these days.
Yeah. No,
so you never know where media is going.
No, exactly. Well, both of us were on Calling the Shots, the Dan Norcross and Adam Collins radio documentary recently about cricket broadcasting in cricket and in radio and TV. And you do realize that the internet has opened up those other options. And I wouldn't be sitting here with you if the internet didn't exist. There was no way that someone like I would have been able to force my way in. I wasn't at one of India's top management schools. I didn't speak French. I was parking cars for a living when I got my big break.
That's because you come from an egalitarian society where it's okay to do that. I love that about Australia. It
does help, but to be fair, I didn't get my big break in Australia. I got my big break in England because I was Australian, because of the internet. You know, so all those sorts of things come together. So it's very interesting. I don't know how much you've been following recently, but this is one of 3 of my podcasts. I've got 2 other podcasts, and I've got a YouTube channel. And I think the way that people are doing things is completely different. I've just done my first ever video essay, which is almost like a documentary in itself, but it's an animated thing, and I got a couple more coming out shortly. The options that we have of how we can create stuff in cricket has just gone absolutely through the roof. I had a conversation with Mike Selvey the night of his last test, and I said, you've seen my career. What should I be doing that I haven't done yet? And he looked at me dumbfounded, going, "You've already done 100 more things than I've ever done." And that's how quickly it is moving. So things like video essays didn't even exist. We are not that far away. In fact, I would say we've already had a few come through, professional cricket tweeters. People who, they start off being a little bit funny on their own Twitter account. Next thing you know, they're working for the ECB and no one knows they're working for the ECB. Then they're working for the IPL. Then they're working for the CPL. We didn't even think of as Twitter as a form of writing not that long ago, and suddenly you have people who that is their job, and that's crafting a good tweet. In fact, I'm going to quote you here. I remember very early on you were trying to explain the difference between T20 and Test cricket, and you said there's still skills involved in both of them. If a writer has to construct a tweet, they still have to go about using their writing skills to be able to do that. I don't think we thought about those sorts of things back then, and you were explaining something else, but those sorts of things make sense. And when I talk to young students, I say, don't look down on Twitter. Don't look down on Snapchat. Cricket is going to have a bunch of TikTok stars in the next little while. In fact, the COVID has sort of brought, I don't know if you are a TikToker, Harsha.
They've been after me they've been after me, but how much social media can you do?
That's a very fair point. But that's what I say to the young people now. That all you're trying to do is use a medium of either making people love cricket more or educate people more about cricket. Those are the two basic things that we do as cricket storytellers, whether you're a writer or a commentator or any of those things. Who is to say you can't do that on an 8-second Vine video? Or who's to say that you can't do that on Snapchat or on LinkedIn or on House Party? All those different mediums are available to you. And I think that it is snobbishness that stops people from going towards those sorts of things.
Never look down on snobbishness, Jarrod. Never, ever look down on snobbishness, because one man's snobbishness is another man's opportunity.
So I always think that
I've learned that all my life, because I've always had to work harder than someone else and had to say yes to survive. If people look down on something, may they always look down on it, because that is your opportunity.
Yeah. Exactly. And so I see it the complete other way. You remember this when me and Sam used to make the silly movies, the silly short movies beforehand. We were 10, 11 Ashes walking around, and a few of the English journalists got together and they said we weren't real journalists. Even though we were writing for places, because we were making these silly videos, we weren't real journalists. The 2 summers later in England, every one of them was out on the outfield making those videos, because our videos were so popular that all the newspapers decided that they needed their staff to do those videos. And I still laugh about that, because for me, it just doesn't matter what the medium is. The message matters, and you find a new way to create. You probably didn't think that you would be doing, the kind of videos you're doing for Cricket Buzz. You're a proper TV person, with a huge fan base, and yet you're on, online having to do these other sort of niche things. But you're making it work, and you probably, in some ways, maybe get more access to people because it's a bit more casual.
For example, doing interviews on Zoom. I'm doing interviews on Zoom, but I've always been a slow learner, Jarrod. I've been lucky in that I've got opportunities. I've always been a slow learner. So my first couple of Zoom interviews, the audio is terrible. I'm now on an iPad that Gaurav Kapoor presented to me, saying, go use this. And it took me a while. This is the only thing I can do on an iPad yet. I'm still learning my way around. But suddenly I'm saying, when you do an interview, you're sitting someone across and you play off that other person's body language. You know how that other person's feeling. You spend time calming that person down. There's a lot of visual cues, like there are verbal cues in a good interview and in a good broadcast. I can't do that just now. I can't. I'm doing an interview with Babar Azam. I have no idea how that interview is going to go. I don't have time to make him feel at ease. So I've done that on WhatsApp before it started. But suddenly I'm starting to enjoy doing Zoom interviews. Can you imagine what I thought was impersonal?
Are you enjoying them because they can come quicker and faster and there's not as much of the rigmarole beforehand? Or are you enjoying them because they're a new skill that you're learning?
I'm enjoying them because I have no choice but to learn a new skill. And as I learn the new skill, I'm saying, how can I make this enjoyable? Because if I look upon it as a poor country cousin of what I like to do, then I'll look upon it as a chore and I won't enjoy it. And I'm saying, okay, I've got to do these Zoom interviews. How can they be more fun? And I'm doing an interview with Ashwin. It is so much fun. I'm doing one with Hardik Pandya. And Hardik Pandya cannot stop talking because he wants to tell his story too. And we're doing it on Zoom. It did 2 million views. You never know where things are going these days. So that was the last question I wanted to ask you. Where is the future? And you almost answered that. If you're freelance, you have no choice but to explore every new form of media. My only question is the question that venture capital people, private equity people, investors ask: what is the revenue model? And how long does it remain romance? And at what point does romance have to shake hands with this arch enemy, which is commerce?
So when we started our videos before Qriket, so we did them on our own. Okay, let me even go back further. At no stage in my career have I ever asked how I'm going to make money off this thing. What I ask is, am I interested enough to throw myself into it so that I can make it work, right? There is always money out there if you are creative, if you continue to acquire knowledge, if you learn new technologies. There is always going to be money at the end of it. If you start with how I make money off this is the thing. There is no, maybe outside of Adam Collins and perhaps Mark Nicholas, who's just got his big deal. I don't think there's any cricket podcast making any money, right, at the moment. In 5 years' time, that's not going to be the case. So if you are a young kid with an interesting take on cricket now, and you have the energy and the passion and the ability to make a good cricket podcast, there will be a sponsor that will come. You will be bought out by a company. There may be other ways that you can make money off podcasts. If you go that way, that's for the venture capitalists to work out. They'll come and, get messages to me in a little while because I'll have a podcast network, because I have a YouTube channel. At the moment, what I have to do is come up with the opposite side of things, which is how do I make something that is high quality, that is regular, that actually, it doesn't matter what the medium is, whatever medium I decide on, that's fine, that I can do that won't be a strain on my life, so that if I put one episode up with you and everyone goes, oh, Harsha, we've heard him talk a million times, we're not going to listen to that episode. Then the next episode is with some random cricket scientist that I drag up and that gets 1 million views. I have to not be down on myself for that one episode that didn't work. I have to know that I am building something that will eventually work. So when you ask that sort of thing, I don't know where this podcast network will eventually go and where the YouTube will go. And I've now got an email subscribing system that I'm doing. All these different things I'm creating. At the moment, they're making very little money. But what I do know is in 6 months' time, I will have a lot of work and the audience will slowly grow. And that's when people start to come in. And if you are building things that no one else has ever built, generally, you're always ahead of the game anyway. And then you come in on the back end. And that's kind of been how I build my career, which is probably completely different to how someone who has a marketing background does things.
I'll tell you the story of the biggest breaks in my life. The biggest breaks have come when I've said, I don't know how much I'm going to get paid, will I? When TWI said, will you come and join us? I did not ask them how much. And one of my friends told me, they pay you $100 a day. Are you nuts working for $100 a day? I said, are you nuts? Shh. I would have paid them to get the opportunity. So the biggest breaks I've got are when I didn't ask how much. I actually ended up getting more than I deserved. Not actually, I'm using those words carefully, more than I deserved at a couple of times. And every time I've said, let's do this, the money is damn good, it hasn't happened, Jarrod. I don't know if there's a cosmic force. I don't know what it is. It's eerie. I don't know if there's another force. Every time I tell myself, this is easy money, come on, let's do it, it hasn't happened. And every time I've told myself, come on, let's have fun, man. Who knows where this path takes us? I've got more than I deserved.
100%. I have had a job offer recently and I literally talked them down. And they were like, why would you do that? We know what your basic rate is. And I said, because I don't want to do this for 4 weeks and get paid really well. I actually believe in this project. I'm going to invest my time in this project and make it great so that you'll never want to take it away from me. And it will eventually make money.
But I have seen one thing. Beyond a certain point, the romance has to have a cousin walking alongside, because you get tired after a certain age and you don't have the same drive to go into 10 different things the way you have at your age. At that point, your romance should have had a commercial angle to it. Otherwise, you're tired and you're romantic, and that doesn't work very much. At some point, the romance has to translate into commerce, but that's for another day.
You're 100% right. I just think that if you keep following the thing that you're interested in and you throw everything you have in that, the cousin always ends up turning up. Because once you make something that is successful and has some sort of buzz, the money people find you at that point. And if you go looking for the money people to start with, I've not found that a successful marriage. But thank you very much.
May always be that way for you, because you're at this wonderful age where you want to experiment. You don't mind failing. You don't mind. One of my friends told me, one of my friends who's in mergers and acquisitions, and he said to me, the guy who always wins the deal is the guy who's willing to walk out. So if you're willing to fail, that is when you're giving yourself your best chance of success, but do it at this age.
I mean, that's the second wisest thing you've said after earlier.
I don't say too many wise things, because you just said the scientist will get you 1 million views and nobody will see me.
I thought the one nice thing that you said was about the point fielder at using his left arm.
Yeah, true.
That's brilliant. You've said two things. We've only been talking for 4 hours, and you've come up with two magical moments.
I actually practiced throwing underarm left-handed.
I love that.
I found that at 10, 15 yards, I saved myself the time of pick up, turn around, and throw with the right hand. Anyway.
There is no better way to end with young Harsha talking about how nervous she was as a fielder, that he trained himself with the opposite hand. Thank you very much for coming on.
Pleasure, Jarrod. Pleasure. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. You can follow my guest at Bhogle Harsha. I'm also on the Twitters and Instagram sometimes as well. I don't know, other things. I'm on things. Please review this podcast on Apple Podcasts or anywhere really. The more you share it and review it and do all those sorts of things really does help us and makes me feel better as a person. I want you to give me just a little bit of self-esteem every day when I get up. But most importantly, this podcast is made possible by the people who support us at Patreon. I only realized recently how many P's there were in that sentence, but I'm not going to change it because I really like it. If you can help us out on Patreon, it allows us to make this podcast, our other podcast, Double Century, and we have other podcasts on the way. There's a lot of podcasts. If you can help us on Patreon, it's huge for us. And Red Inker is made by me, Jarrod Kimber. Nick McCorriston touches your soul through reverb, and our theme tune is called The Prisoner by the Red Qriket. Like this podcast? Why not try Double Century, my podcast on the history of cricket? Want to know why England's first test keeper was in jail? Or the moment when we learned to hit the ball over our heads? Find Double Century in all of your greatest podcast apps.